Welcome back to CBS Mornings. It's been exactly 1 year since the Taliban took over Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting with the U.S. and its allies. We all remember those very chaotic scenes at the Kabul airport as American forces withdrew from the country. Since then, the Taliban has cemented its control. Over the weekend, Taliban fighters broke up a protest by dozens of Afghan women by firing their weapons into the air. Imtitaz Tyab is in Kabul for more on this story with us. Imtitaz, good morning to you. The picture is very scary.
Indeed, Gayle, and good morning to you. Well, the Taliban is really celebrating the 1 year anniversary of its takeover of Afghanistan and indeed the end of 2 decades of fighting. But for the Afghans we've been speaking to, today is a day of sadness, anger, and fear.
The tumultuous end to America's longest war, immortalized in these chaotic scenes. The Taliban's lightning-fast takeover of Afghanistan just weeks before the United States' planned military withdrawal triggered such intense panic that thousands of Afghans stormed the Kabul airport in a desperate attempt to flee the country. Some even clinging to a moving U.S. military aircraft as it rose into the sky and falling to their deaths. It's an anguish Zakir Razai and his family live with to this day. His 17-year-old son Zabi was found among the dead, while his 19-year-old son Zaki, who had also clung to the aircraft, hasn't been seen or heard from since.
Take us back to 1 year ago.
The only memories I have are that my children's bodies were mangled and torn to pieces, he says. It's 1 year that I've been searching for my son. This is the calamity that I remember. But for the Taliban, today is a day of joy, as hundreds filled the central Kabul square just yards from where the U.S. Embassy once stood, waving flags and chanting, "God is great," rejoicing that it's back in control of a country it once ruled from 1996 up until the 2001 Allied invasion that followed the 9/11 attacks.
As the Taliban celebrates its 1 year anniversary of taking over Afghanistan, make no mistake, this is a nation that remains internationally isolated, with not a single country recognizing the Taliban government.
And yet, the Taliban's day-to-day focus seems to be more about controlling the lives of women. They've told them not to go to work, have said girls over the age of 12 cannot go to most formal schools, and have placed restrictions on women's freedom of movement. Akif Mahajer speaks for the Ministry of Vice and Virtue, which has issued these decrees. Islamic law permits women to travel alone for up to 48 miles without a male guardian, he says, but not any further because a woman is a creation of God that cannot endure difficult journeys.
Can you at least see why people look at your government, look at your ministry with suspicion, particularly on this specific issue of women?
No, he says, we don't listen to the world as far as our Islamic law prescribes. We will not yield to the world's unwarranted pressures. Despite the risk, some Afghan women continue to defy the Taliban. In a rare protest this weekend, around 40 women took to the streets of Kabul to demand their rights, chanting bread, work, and freedom. But were instead met with bullets as Taliban security forces fired live rounds into the air to disperse them. 1 year into the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, and the nation also remains in the grips of what the UN considers the world's worst humanitarian crisis, after the Biden administration froze billions in assets from the central bank and foreign donors pulled vast amounts of funding that once made up 3/4 of the nation's annual budget.
Now, as the Taliban celebrates its 1 year anniversary and indeed the end of America's longest war, it has to be said that this country is far less violent than it was while it was in conflict. But when you consider the fact that the Taliban continues to strip away the most basic rights and the economy here remains in free fall, for many Afghans, the future remains extremely bleak. Tony.
Starvation, loss of rights is about as bad as a lot of people feared it would be. Imtitaz Tyab for us in Afghanistan. Imtitaz, thank you very much.